don't trust nobody. In Hollywood specifically, when you get there, a lot of people don't know how to say no. That's the difference between New York City and California.
And I'm gonna tell you why 50 is literally is a diabolical genius. And he's
The courtroom was tense, the kind of tension that makes the air feel heavier, like you're wading through something invisible yet suffocating. It was day 5 of Sean Diddy Combs' trial, and although the proceedings had already been dramatic, filled with emotional testimonies, leaked evidence, and whispered allegations, nothing could have prepared anyone for what happened next. The double doors at the back of the gallery swung open, and there he was, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson.
Documentary, I think a lot of people thought that he was just joking around. It turns out he's not, so this is actually a real project that's being made under his G-Unit movie.
The entrance wasn't announced. It didn't need to be. His presence hit the room like a shockwave, a ripple of disbelief spreading from the back rows to the judge's bench. It wasn't just that he was there, it was why he was there that sent a chill through the room. For weeks, 50 Cent had been stirring the pot online, dropping cryptic posts, sharing old clips, and making veiled comments about the trial. But nobody thought he'd actually show up, and certainly not like this. Dressed in a slate gray suit that looked freshly tailored, with dark sunglasses hiding his expression, he moved like a man who was in total control. He didn't glance around or acknowledge the murmurs rising around him. He simply walked to a seat near the back, crossed his arms, and leaned back ever so slightly, exuding an air of quiet defiance.
So that's just competitive.
Competitiveness.
All right, so you and Diddy, you and Puff cool?
No, I don't really rock with him.
Okay,
like that.
damn, all right. I didn't know what that meant.
Okay,
All right, okay.
Diddy, seated at the defense table, saw him immediately. Witnesses later recounted how the music mogul's body visibly tensed, his jaw tightening as his fingers gripped the edge of the table. For a man who had built his career and his empire on maintaining an aura of invincibility, his reaction was startling. He leaned toward his lead attorney, whispering something with an urgency that betrayed his unease. The prosecutor, mid-stride as she prepared to address the court, paused noticeably, letting the moment settle. This wasn't just a celebrity appearance, it was a statement, a declaration that the silence surrounding the industry's darkest secrets was finally breaking.
This guy
50's not to be
No, don't
50's not
with Fifth. Y'all don't even, Fifth is
play around if you want to.
Fifth is different.
And it wasn't just 50 Cent's presence that sent shockwaves through the room. Rumors had already been swirling about his involvement behind the scenes. Insiders claimed he had been quietly working with Cassie's legal team, supplying evidence, coordinating timelines, and even connecting them with former employees of Diddy's who had their own stories to tell. There were whispers of old, call logs, private emails, and even a written statement from a former bodyguard who alleged he had witnessed unsettling incidents at Diddy's infamous mansion parties. This wasn't just about showing up to offer moral support. 50 Cent was inserting himself into the narrative in a way that was impossible to ignore.
But she was only on the stand for about 30 minutes, and the big takeaway is this story that she tells regarding the email she got from her daughter in December of 2011. This is where Cassie Ventura writes her mother and another person explaining or expressing that Sean Puffy Combs, she said, threatened to put out explicit videos of her. Again, this is around the holiday time, and also saying that he would do something to the person that she was.
The energy in the courtroom shifted dramatically. Reporters who had been lazily typing notes just minutes earlier were now scrambling to document the moment. Courtroom artists sketched furiously, cameras outside clicked incessantly, and social media exploded in real time. Within minutes, 50 Cent's appearance was trending across every platform with hashtags like 50 Cent in court and Justice for Cassie dominating timelines. Some posts speculated that he was there to unveil new evidence, while others suggested he was making a calculated move to destabilize Diddy's already shaky defense. Whatever the reason, his mere presence had changed everything.
Now you got the Diddy situation where he jumps on a private jet, they say yesterday, and is on his way to the Cape Verde Islands.
The defense team looked visibly rattled. Papers shuffled, frantic whispers flew across the table, and one of Diddy's attorneys was seen gesturing urgently toward the judge's bench. They understood the stakes. 50 Cent wasn't just a rapper turned entrepreneur, he was a cultural force, a disruptor whose voice carried weight both in the industry and with the public. His arrival wasn't just about supporting Cassie, it was about sending a message to everyone in that room and beyond that the days of silence and complicity were over. Outside the courtroom, the buzz reached a fever pitch. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones and cameras thrust forward as they tried to capture the moment. Then, as if on cue, 50 Cent stepped out during the lunch break. He didn't need to say much. His mere presence had already spoken volumes, but the few words he did offer sent the internet into overdrive. He reportedly confirmed that he had been working with Cassie's team, providing them with everything they needed to build their case. He didn't elaborate, but the implications were clear. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a reckoning.
Listen to everybody, but you believe all proof.
Believe the facts.
This video is proof.
Hands down proof.
The industry's reaction was swift and dramatic. Within hours, celebrities began distancing themselves from Diddy. Artists who had once proudly displayed their affiliations with him on social media started scrubbing their feeds. Usher, a longtime collaborator, quietly unfollowed Diddy on Instagram. Mary J. Blige removed photos of the two together. Even Justin Bieber, who had previously described Diddy as a mentor, posted a cryptic message that read, "Sometimes the truth takes too long, but it always comes." It didn't stop there. Major brands reportedly began pulling their sponsorships from Diddy's ventures, and rumors of advertisers withdrawing from his media empire, Revolt, began circulating. Behind the scenes, Diddy's defense team was in full-blown crisis mode. Unverified leaks suggested that they had called an emergency strategy meeting that lasted late into the night. The team was reportedly divided on how to respond to the sudden shift in momentum. Some wanted to double down on their strategy of portraying Diddy as misunderstood but ultimately innocent, while others argued for a complete pivot, suggesting that they frame him as a flawed human being who had made mistakes but didn't deserve the public crucifixion he was now facing. Meanwhile, Cassie's legal team was reportedly preparing to introduce new evidence, bolstered by the tidal wave of support that 50 Cent's appearance had brought.
Prosecution, I believe, was trying to show that level of control that they talked about at the very beginning of this case. And then to see that her family talks about being intimidated and fearing for Cassie's safety, and that's why they sent the money, they said, because they were really concerned. We also learned that the mother's the one who said, you know what, I want to take pictures of this abuse. Again, the mom said she did not know about that.
Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Every glance, every movement carried weight. Cassie, who had already spent hours on the stand recounting painful and deeply personal experiences, walked in that afternoon with a different kind of energy. Witnesses described her as composed, almost defiant, as if she'd found strength in the support flooding in from outside. She didn't just testify. She delivered. Each word was measured, deliberate, and cutting. She spoke of control, manipulation, and a pattern of behavior that painted a chilling picture of life behind the scenes of one of the music industry's most powerful figures. The courtroom was silent as she described an incident in 2017 during a private event in the Hamptons. Cassie alleged that she had been confined to a guest house for over 48 hours after texting another artist. She detailed the unwritten rules she was expected to follow at Diddy's parties. Rules that dictated where she could stand, who she could speak to, and when she was allowed to leave. Her testimony was damning, but it was the recordings and text messages that followed that truly shook the room. Audio clips reportedly retrieved from an old cloud account were played aloud. In one, a voice alleged to be Diddy's could be heard warning her not to test him. The recording was brief but chilling, leaving the room in stunned silence.
Trying a criminal case in the modern times, a lot of evidence is on electronic devices, cell phone, tablets, computers, things of that nature. And the devices, especially if you have like external hard drives, 90-something terabytes of data on a single device makes me think it's some type of hard drive. That takes weeks to go through just for one device on its own.
Even the jury, who had remained largely unreadable throughout the trial, seemed visibly impacted. One juror, described as a young man in his late 20s, leaned forward in his seat, his eyes locked on Cassie as she spoke. Another, an older woman who had been quietly taking notes all week, suddenly stopped writing and folded her arms, her expression hardening as the audio played. This wasn't just testimony, it was a turning point, a moment that seemed to crystallize the stakes of this trial for everyone involved.
We're really starting to get more of Cassie's side of this story, and a very striking moment in court, too, was that she broke down crying earlier during her testimony. Jerika talked about how she talked about doing these freak-offs because she wanted one-on-one time.
As the afternoon wore on, the cracks in Diddy's defense became impossible to ignore. His once confident legal team now appeared harried, their carefully constructed narrative unraveling in real time. And Diddy himself? He sat frozen, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him, his composure slipping with each passing minute. It was clear that the man who had once seemed untouchable was now facing the fight of his life. But the day wasn't over yet, and the revelations were far from finished. And then came the moment that shattered whatever fragile composure Diddy had managed to maintain. As Cassie's testimony continued, her words painted a picture that wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Her descriptions of the so-called control architecture that surrounded her life with Diddy weren't just shocking, they were chilling. According to her, this wasn't just about one man's behavior. It was about a network, a well-oiled machine designed to isolate, monitor, and silence anyone who dared to step out of line. She claimed there were employees assigned to track her every move, assistants who ensured she was available when needed, and security staff who enforced unwritten rules about where she could go and who she could speak to. The implication was clear. This wasn't just a toxic relationship. It was a system built to control.
Even the judge has made mention of not wanting this to be a case sort of built on gossip, but really making sure that these jurors are hearing the meat and potatoes of what we're here for. And that's the criminal enterprise, racketeering, trafficking, and making sure that we're hearing information that somehow lead to all of those things.
But what landed hardest that afternoon wasn't her words, it was the evidence. Cassie's legal team introduced a series of messages and internal company memos that seemed to corroborate her claims. One text exchange, allegedly between Cassie and a member of Diddy's inner circle, outlined a detailed itinerary for one of his infamous private events. The instructions were explicit, down to what she should wear and how she should behave. Another document, reportedly pulled from a cloud storage account, appeared to be a list of names, people who were approved to attend these gatherings. Whispers rippled through the room as the list was read aloud. It included not just industry insiders, but household names, individuals who now found themselves unexpectedly dragged into the scandal. The courtroom was electric with tension as the prosecution unveiled yet another piece of evidence, surveillance footage from one of Diddy's properties. The grainy video, time-stamped from years ago, showed Cassie in what appeared to be a heated argument with a man identified as a member of Diddy's security team. In the footage, Cassie could be seen gesturing emphatically, her body language a mix of frustration and fear. The argument ended with the security guard stepping aside, allowing her to leave the room. But the damage was done. The video, coupled with the other evidence, painted a picture of life in Diddy's orbit that was anything but glamorous.
Like, I can't believe it. Like, that somebody would do that to somebody that they say they love.
Yeah.
Think about it, because she was on the floor, passed out. She looked lifeless. And he was...
And yet, the defense was not without its own moves. During cross-examination, Diddy's attorney zeroed in on Cassie's credibility, questioning her motives and suggesting she had benefited significantly from her association with Diddy. They presented evidence of luxury trips, expensive gifts, and career opportunities that had come her way during their time together. The line of questioning was clear. They wanted to frame her as willing participant, someone who had accepted the perks of her relationship with Diddy and was now turning against him for financial gain. But if they thought this strategy would rattle her, they were wrong. Cassie remained composed. Even as the defense pressed harder, her responses steady and unshaken. Outside the courtroom, the fallout was spreading like wildfire. News outlets were running wall-to-wall coverage, dissecting every piece of evidence, every word of testimony. Social media was ablaze with speculation. Some users were calling for a boycott of Diddy's ventures, while others were demanding accountability from the industry at large. Even major brands began to distance themselves from Diddy, with several quietly announcing that they were suspending partnerships and sponsorships, pending the outcome of the trial. But perhaps the most damning blow came from within the industry itself. In the days following 50 Cent's courtroom appearance, multiple former employees of Diddy's companies came forward with their own stories. Some spoke anonymously, while others attached their names to detailed accounts of what they had witnessed. One former assistant claimed to have been tasked with tracking Cassie's movements and reporting back to Diddy. Another, a former event coordinator, described being asked to arrange private gatherings under conditions that made her uncomfortable. These accounts, while unverified, added fuel to an already roaring fire.
Because I think, we have seen many photos, videos of Sean Combs, aka Diddy, through the Associated Press, through Instagram. And so to see him kind of in person after being in jail for 3 weeks now was pretty interesting, to say the least. And I say that by being that you would expect him to feel a little defeated, a little gaunt, anything like that. But it wasn't that case. He appeared confident. He stood tall. But
the prosecution seized on this momentum, calling to the stand a former tour manager who had worked with Diddy during some of the years in question. His testimony was explosive. He described incidents of intimidation, sudden outbursts of anger, and a pervasive culture of fear. According to him, employees were often placed in impossible situations, torn between their professional obligations and their personal ethics. He recounted one instance where he was instructed to ensure that no one had access to their phones during a private event, a directive he later learned was intended to prevent leaks.
a window into Cassie's side of the story. There's a video that people may have seen. It was aired by CNN years ago. It's become a video at the heart of this case. That's security footage from the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016, where there appears to be Sean Combs assaulting Cassie Ventura. You see him.
As the trial unfolded, the focus began to shift from the personal to the institutional. The question wasn't just about what Diddy had allegedly done, but about how the industry had allowed it to happen. How had so many people stayed silent for so long? What did it say about the power dynamics in a business that thrives on secrecy and loyalty? These were the questions that loomed large, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. And then came the bombshell. On what was supposed to be a routine day of testimony, the prosecution announced that they had obtained new evidence. An audio recording reportedly made by one of Diddy's former employees. The recording, which was played in court, captured a conversation between two individuals discussing how to manage a situation involving Cassie. The voices were calm, almost clinical, as they outlined a plan to ensure that she remained compliant. The room was silent as the recording played, the implications sinking in with every word.
By the way, if you got to run to a private island because your evil doings is doing so much and they storming your house, it's one of these.
The defense tried to object, arguing that the recording was irrelevant and prejudicial, but the judge overruled them. By the time the day's proceedings ended, it was clear that the tide had turned even further. Diddy's legal team looked increasingly desperate, their confidence eroding with each new revelation. And Diddy himself? He sat stone-faced, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him, his once unshakable image now a shadow of its former self. As the trial entered its next phase, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about one man or one case. It was about accountability, about the structures that had enabled abuse and protected the powerful. And with every passing day, it became clearer that those structures were beginning to crack. So where does this leave us? Is this the beginning of the end for Diddy's reign? Or is it just the tip of an iceberg that could bring the entire industry to its knees? Let us know what you think down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates as this story continues to unfold. This one's far from over.